Thank you. And just before I start, everyone, you can hear I have a kind of funny British accent. So I do apologise, and I do get kind of excited and speak really quickly at some times. So if I lose you, just kind of wave at me frantically, and I'll try and slow down again. So I'm going to talk about Agrokor, which is the unit of business we're in now. It's 4 pillars, largely. That slide looks horrendous. One part is media, which is kind of important for us because reaching out to farmers. We've been working with growers for hundreds of years, actually, within our parent company. And we're quite a trusted source. So there's a couple of magazines in the UK called Farmers Weekly. In the Netherlands, it's called Boerderij. I can't pronounce that very well because I'm not Dutch. But it's good to work with the guys at that level. So we're kind of a trusted advisor. So we do farm management software to help the guys manage and grow their farm. My particular piece around on the right-hand side here around integration and connectivity, which is really important dealing with big data, because to do anything with the data, you need to get the data. If you don't have the data, you're kind of stuck. And then, of course, data and analytics. So why agriculture? Why big data in agriculture? And apologies for the Scottish Highland cow. One of my colleagues is a Scot, and he always makes me put this slide up. There are about 570 million farms around the world. 25 million tractors. Each tractor will emit about 30 megabytes of data per day. So that's quite a lot of data just on tractors and machinery. Yeah, 50 billion chickens. They don't live too long, so we don't worry too much about those. Sheep, of course. We like those guys. Pigs. Now, cows, bizarrely enough, this original presentation was entitled Fitbit for Cows. We do actually use sensors with cattle to get back data from the cows. So where they are in their cycle, are they going lame? Are they ready to milk? Those kind of things. And the quality of the milk coming off the cow as well is important for the farmer, because that's how he gets paid. One thing I will say is, obviously it's got quite a few people here from US and internationals. In the UK, our cows all have passports. Okay, they don't go on holiday too often to Spain and places like that, but they do actually have a passport. We know exactly every single cow they've interacted with. We know. So if I borrow a cow from you, it goes into my system and I have to capture that data. So again, huge amounts of data. So yeah, again, why ag? Well, ultimately we have about 9.5 billion people by 2050 in the world. That's a lot of mouths to feed with what we have today. So one of the stats I heard was we have to double the production from our arable land that we have today by 2050. Which is like a 50 times increase. It's huge increases in actual what we can produce from the land we have. The land isn't growing. We have less water because of global warming and climate change. And of course, we've got to then make things healthier, and food provenance is a big thing, right? We want to know what we're eating. We want to know where it came from. We want to know what was done to it. So these things are all kind of quite interesting. Just as a because everyone looks at you and thinks, well, the weather, if you have a bad weather, that leads to a bad yield. Actually, no, weather is, just over a quarter of the outcome of a crop, okay? It's all the things like nitrogen, so we spray nitrogen to increase protein in our wheat. Hybrids, so varieties of seeds and things like that. What was in the ground before, so crop rotation, and how the plant's taking in the ground, so it depends on the soil, for example. And those sorts of things, tillage, how we plant, and any growth regulators, so if we're trying to avoid disease and those sorts of things. So just as a kind of overview of what we have and where we collect our data from, obviously farm management systems. Now, if you think of old Visual Basic 5 and those sorts of things, sort of pre.NET era PCs, you're in the sort of landscape of data where we play. So 2 guys in a shed 50 years ago wrote a bit of software, they have abacuses and those kind of things. That's literally the level where we deal. Okay, that's where we get our data from. So we really have to connect to anything and pull it back. We also do mobile applications in some of our countries and some of our customers. Satellites and drones are de rigueur. Probably every week I hear of a new company offering to use drones to give farmers data about fields. We're also doing satellite imagery as well, which is kind of cool. That also plays to the machine learning piece, and is a very interesting area for us. I talked about sensors on the cows. Soil. Knowing actually what the soil is gives you a lot more interesting stuff. So, does this soil hold moisture? Is it very dry? Is it very arid? Does it change temperature much? How closely packed together is it? Those sorts of things. Machinery is just a huge source, as I've mentioned. And then weather, of course, because that is a big factor, I can't lie. But actually not just the weather for this year and what the clouds are doing today. What happened last year on that crop has a material impact, as you'll see in a second. And of course then we've got the supply chain side of things. So, you know, am I applying the right crop protection to my seed to get the best outcome? That's kind of important to know, and the manufacturers kind of want to obfuscate that stuff because they wouldn't want you to recommend using their competitors' products on their seed, for example. And then our world revolves really around agronomists, the plant doctors of this world. They don't like to be told the outcome, they like to be given the triggers to find things. So they're quite cool in terms of working with the data. You probably won't be able to read this, but this is our overview approach. It's basically a collection of the data. We then beat it around a bit with some good algorithms, spit it out the other end to do some analytics work, and then feed it back out. So if you think of taking some data in, generating a recommendation, and feeding that back out to the grower for execution. That's kind of the general cycle that we follow. This is the arbitrary platform slide. So as you've seen, I'm hanging around with the HPCC team. We actually use their platform as a core part of our big data solution. It's really good. I'm not paid to say that, honestly, but I can recommend it for all your data needs. We basically bring the data in, pass it down the funnel, clean it up. Where HPCC has helped us a lot is on the entity linking in particular. If you imagine farmers aren't typists and how you clean the data up, entity linking is your friend. So a couple of the dashboards and what we deliver. So it basically is a global insight. What's going on? What's happening at what times? Did the grower follow protocol? Did he plant something when he was supposed to plant something? Did he apply crop protection when he was supposed to apply crop protection? So it's giving the analytics and giving the feedbacks and insights. Is this pesticide better than the other pesticide? Those sorts of things. And ultimately increasing the yield and profitability. It's no good actually increasing the yield if it costs you too much to increase the yield. That upsets farmers generally. They get kind of antsy about that. So I thought I'd talk through one of our examples around what we do. And this is patterns of oil. We call it oilseed rape. Here in North America, you call it canola because it's probably a slightly nicer term. But the whole thing here was, what happened in 2016? Why was 2016 such a bad year? What sort of thing have we seen based on the data we have correlates to a better yield? And actually, how effective are pesticides? And are hybrids any better? Firstly, before I present the findings, there are a few gotchas. Correlation does not equal causation, and we always have to remember this. This is the old global warming versus number of pirates, and correlating those two together, because clearly we need more pirates in the world to make life better. Secondly, we have some unusual yields. So this goes down to our data cleanliness and data hygiene factors. To give you a feel, that's like 36 million kilograms a hectare. A hectare is about the size of a soccer field, a rugby field, so it's not really a huge amount of land. That's equivalent to parking one of those on a rugby field. Okay, that's kind of unrealistic. As I've kind of alluded to, growers aren't very skilled at data entry. These guys are out tilling the fields, driving the tractors, living life to the max. They're really unskilled at data entry. As an example, when we're cleaning data up, these are varieties. Actually, what they are on the right-hand side. So this is a really good use case of where we use machine learning. Just to clean that up, there's about 20 factors that we have to factor into our algorithms and fill in the missing blanks. So that's where the machine learning piece comes in. So just another little fun graphic. How has the yield varied over the last 10 years? Well, you can see 2016 on the right-hand side. You probably won't be able to see the text around it, but it's going back year on year. 2015 was quite good. 2016 was really, really bad. So just looking at that, why? Okay, and the average actually is about 3,700 kilograms a hectare. So again, going back to the 36 million a little while ago, you can see how bad that was. Most of the growers we find are, within about 1,500 kilograms a hectare. So there's not a huge variance, but that's still quite a lot of money at stake here. So yeah, above and below. Oops. But it's not cost consistent. So depending where you are, you can be wildly out. And year on year, you can be wildly out as well. We then started thinking, well, maybe this can be related to the variety choice. There are lots of varieties out there of seed, and there are hybrids, so do they help? Well, not really, is the answer. And again, the numbers are quite small here, but you can see that this is divided between the north and south of England. For those of you that have never been to the UK, we do get a lot of rain. We get even more rain in the north of England. Okay, it's kind of grim up north is the phrase we use in the sun from the south. So the phrase we generally use, it's grim up north, and there is a very big north-south divide. But not necessarily on the hybrids. So we then, again, through our machine learning, we're starting to look at the hybrids and how they affect. And actually, what was kind of interesting is what sort of hybrids did the guys in the north choose versus the guys in the south? One of my favourite ones here would be the stem stiffness is very popular in the north of England. Now, why would you think that would be interesting? Well, it's not much sunlight, so the plants need to be taller to get some sun, is really why that would be good. So yeah, here's some kind of interesting stats for you to play around with. Obviously, we've got all this data. Visualization is king, and actually getting it out. Once you get it in, it's really hard, but doing interesting stuff with it is interesting. If you look at the hybrid use case, there's around 150 variables. We don't know what's linked to what before we start. So we've got all this data, but how do you make sense of it? Okay, which is the challenge that we're all here for. So here's a quick one for you. What is this? Anyone? Clue is really I'm from London, so actually it's a London bus. The big red bus. But again, until we switch it to a different view, we can't understand what it is, right? It could be just a building block or something else, okay? It's the same with our data. So we started graphing things out and to realize what they mean. So obviously, two things that are the same height at the same time are in the same quadrant, so temperature and yield. Two things that are opposite, or high at opposite times, again, temperature, yield. This could be summer versus winter crop. And two completely unrelated things, temperature and yield, would be a pair like this. So this is the market just for the varieties. Okay, there are hundreds of these things. They're all over the place. The ones in yellow are the traditional varieties, so not the hybrids and not the really funky stuff that the guys like Monsanto and Co are building at the moment. Where are we now? So, what about yield? What causes the variation in yield? There are so many factors. So degree days, we like weather and temperature, whether I fertilized or not. So what nutrients are in the soil is kind of important to me. Fungicides, insecticides, and herbicides. So, are there any insects, obviously fungus or insects? When timing of application is also very, very important. So when we actually do something has a material effect. High wind events. So if it's really windy and you're trying to spray your pesticide, that's kind of bad because it will blow away and you won't actually get the yield result you need. Temperature is important. Rainfall. If you apply something to your crop and it gets rained away, again, doesn't really help you. And there's various other things as well, such as where you are. So, going back to my 2D versus 3D, here's a graph. And we can see down here, the thing we want is in the bottom right corner. That's the high yield. So we can see that correlating to a high yield, a warm winter is just below the line. A dry spring, not at the same time as the warm winter. Well, that's logical. Spring doesn't happen at the same time as winter. A warm summer, that's kind of desirable. But again, the summer before being warm is bad because pests survive in warm weather. Do we need fertilizer? Because if you look at the graph there, our target at the bottom right, and the winter fertilization is on the completely opposite angle. So we may not need to fertilize. Depends where we're getting the data from. What we have found, though, is the latitude. So being in the northern part of the country and having the larger stems and the larger wheat varieties is important. So they're the two, between the 2 years. So 15 was a great year, 16 was a bad year. So the answers to our questions, I'll test you on this later. Basically, in 2016, there was a wet spring, and the winter was quite dry, rare for the UK. What correlated the high yield? It was a warm spring, a wet winter, and the timing of the pesticide application. again, as I mentioned before, if you have a warm summer, pests survive. So you have to apply pesticide at the right time to clean things up. So the interesting one as well is about how effective the pesticides are. So for fungicide, so fungus on your crop is bad, that's very effective. For insecticide, not so much. Again, it depends on the conditions around and the winds and whatnot when you apply it. The more interesting thing that if there was anyone from Monsanto or Bayer in the room, I'll probably get killed for, are hybrids any better? Not really, is the answer. So this is what the data is telling us in this particular marketplace. So the key takeaways for this, and I'm actually way ahead of time so I can take lots of questions. If you're a farmer, there's probably too many varieties to choose from. You know, how does a farmer actually choose? How can you give this information, distill it down, and give it to the grower so he can make a more informed decision? That's what we're working on right now with our dashboards. Canola actually is better in a warm spring and a warm winter. Wet spring and a warm winter. If you're an analytics person, like probably everybody in this room, working with big data is great fun, and we have so much data, and it's so unstructured and fun to play with. I've got a whole team of data scientists who barely leave the office because they just can't get away from it. And dimension reduction is a great way of picking out correlations in complex data. Some of the arbitrary customer slides. So I'm now open for questions, and I have plenty of time, so feel free to shoot away. Anybody? In that case, I'm done early. The gift of time, the most valuable gift I can give you. Enjoy your lunch, everybody.